Board. February 15th, public comment period will end. Leonard Charles will then start preparing a final EIR, approximately a 10-week time frame. Come back in a draft final EIR approximately the end of April. And approximately in May of 2008, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing. Planning and building staff will review the final administrative draft and respond to any concerns. And approximately early June, the hearing will be before the Board of Supervisors for certification of the EIR and any action on the proposed ordinance amendment. Just a restatement of timeframes. Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this be the time for board members to ask general questions?
Yes.
Okay. So I have questions that might be applicable to either Mr. Hall or Mr. Charles. To Mr. Charles, just for the board's information for the public, maybe you could go over the process of what you've taken and how you execute behind the scenes, the information you've received today. I believe February 15th is the deadline for written comments. Then it says April, at some point in April, that there would be a release in approximately 10 weeks of the administrative draft final EIR. So what do you do between now and then? What do you do with the written comments? What do you do with board comments? What do you do with, I noticed you've been taking notes today. What do you do with this information, and how do you expect that it will impact the document that we have before us now?
Well, we're required to respond to every comment. We can't just say, we've heard that one. I mean, a lot of times the same comments are made over and over again, and we'll respond to it once, and then we'll say, see response G4 to that same question. But we're required to respond to each one of those. Excuse me. Where the point is valid and we've either made an error or we think that the idea is warranted, then we will make a change in the language of what is this document, the draft EIR. In the case for Mendocino County, what that'll end up is at the end of the document being a list of where the text changes are in the EIR, rather than some jurisdictions actually you do a strikeout, underline, whole new version, but we don't do that in this county. So that we can make the document complete. And where there are disagreements, we will very clearly express what those disagreements are with the comments that are made and why we're not making a change to the EIR, so you'll have all that in front of you. So that will then become a document, and by law, everybody who put in a written comment gets a 10-day opportunity to review those responses before it comes back in front of whoever. I forget if it's coming back in front of you or the Planning Commission, so that they can see, so it's not just sprung on them at the last minute. They get to see what we responded to their comments, so they can come in and say, well, we don't think that was an adequate response, or whatever it may be. And that becomes, so that document, that response to comments document with the changes plus this document together are what are the final environmental impact report for you to determine if it's legally adequate or not.
How will that be available to the public? Will it be online?
Yes.
If I could respond, yes, that document will be available. There will be a number of copies that will be submitted from Leonard Charles. Copies will be available at the Planning and Building Services Department, and the document will also be posted online. So the draft EIR as well as the final EIR will be online for people to view and to compare.
Also part of that at that stage is what's called a mitigation monitoring and reporting program that lists all the various mitigation measures in the EIR, who's going to implement them, who's responsible for monitoring to make sure that they are in fact implemented, and the time frame for that implementation and monitoring.
Okay, thank you. A number of specific questions here that I'd like you to provide some information, maybe direct us to where it is in this rather lengthy document. I've reviewed the document, but I just took notes from some of the highlights of presentations. and concerns that were raised. What about, and this isn't in any particular order, someone raised the question of an evacuation plan, I guess because of the increased traffic and the siting of an industrial operation in this rural area. Where in the document is that addressed, or is it?
Would you like a verbal response now? Because
Sure,
I'd have
that'd
to
be
look
great.
it up. Okay. Which can take me a while. Well, it will take me a while to find it. I can't, it's not
Would you wanna-
jumping out at me.
Could
but I
you
can-
get?
Yes,
could
I
you
will
get
provide
that?
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. The next question that was raised a number of times is this issue of proximity to the charter school that's located there. Is that addressed in one
Yes.
section here, multiple sections?
It's addressed in the air quality section, as well as it may be in the hazard section too, I can't be sure, but it's definitely in the air quality section. 3.9C.
Excuse me. Public comment is closed. Thank you. This man's paid a tremendous amount of money to have these answers, and I expect him to have them without any public input.
I'm not on his side, believe me.
I
I'm one of the
understand.
unpaid soldiers who's trying to help him work this thing out.
I do appreciate that. Thank you. Supervisor Pinches?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, these are issues, this is what the process is about. This is comments on the draft EIR. Now, all these questions and will be addressed in the final EIR. So
That's correct.
I don't think it's our job here today to start writing the final EIR. That's Leonard Charles and Associates' job.
Would that be a fair statement, Mr. Charles?
I'm happy to answer clarifying questions, but yes, I mean, like when a couple of ones that Kendall Smith has said is that those are ones where I really probably ought to spend a little time and try to actually find them. If I jump to the top of my mind, I'm happy to clarify them for you, though. But I will definitely put that in the document where those are addressed.
Okay, thank you. No-
Supervisor Smith?
Continuing, and this may go maybe to Mr. Hall or perhaps to Mr. Zotter, wanting a little more clarification on, and Mr. Hall, I think, touched on this in his introduction of the staff report, this concept of the countywide zoning changes, a member of the public made a comment on what are county objectives. That was a concern that was raised, and just, I think, the honest question of, well, what are the county objectives? Not that you could answer that. But to this countywide zoning change issue, if we could sort of, we had this issue before the board before, and I believe that we went in the direction of a site-specific, a project-specific EIR. Although, again, now this zoning change and amendments are being raised, how has that occurred? What are the issues surrounding that? And the reference to proposals that are here that would actually impact other areas of the county.